Hi, my name is Nikki. This is The Interventionalist, and today I want to talk about the side effects of femme invisibility or dealing with femme invisibility, and sort of what it means to be authentic versus being believable or sort of being clockable. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because I actually got like 5 messages in the past 3 days alone of people saying that this is something they're struggling with. And funnily enough, for the first time since I've come out in the past 4 years, this sort of moment in time, these past couple months, I've been dealing with the side effects of that more than I really ever have after coming out as a lesbian. And I'm dressed like this. If you watch my videos, you know I do not dress like this on here. I don't dress like this really much at all. But the reason that I'm dressed like this right now is so that you have an idea of what I look like when I've been dealing with this. So this is what I wear when I play volleyball. And I started playing volleyball again a couple months ago, and within these past 2 months I've dealt with more accusations of inauthenticity related to my sexuality than probably ever since coming out, and it's because I'm being told I look really straight, so there's no way that I could be gay. This is what I wear, and now I'm done wearing it, so we're gonna switch back to what I usually wear. But I wanted you to see what people consider not gay. There's no way to look or not look gay. You are what you are, but there is a certain aspect of stereotypical signaling and clockability that people look for. And if you aren't fitting that, then there is a chance that you'll be accused of inauthenticity. And I think that's a lot of what femme invisibility is dealing with consistent accusations of inauthenticity. And I think it differs from the kind of, I would say, yeah, I guess this is a form of discrimination, right? Being accused of being inauthentic, but I think it differs from the kind of discrimination you face when you're dressed more masculine, because you're sort of being accused of being part of the in-group while sort of pretending not to be, versus if you present more masculine, you're being discriminated against because you're not seen as part of this this majority in-group, I would say. And it can be really frustrating to be so open about your sexuality and then be met with just outright disagreement. It's very odd to be in a position where you are being honest and then be accused of being a liar simply because of the outfit that you're wearing. And so first I'll just say this is not limited to straight spaces, because the person who's made it the most annoying for me recently when it comes to being accused of being straight, or that I don't really know that I'm gay, is coming from someone else within the LGBTQ community, and someone that I met at an LGBTQ volleyball setting. It was playing for LGBTQ people, but it ends up being a lot of people who are straight and they go as allies. But she's straight, but she's also part of the LGBTQ community, and we play at other places together that aren't gay places. Most places are not. It's the straightest environments I've been in a long time. It reminds me of being in high school when I played. Very straight environments. But she knows that I'm gay because I met her at an LGBTQ thing, and I look like I just did. And almost every single time that I see her, she says that, are you sure? Are you sure you're gay? Are you sure that you're gay? You don't look gay. I mean, lesbians just don't look like that. Are you sure that you're gay? Then if a guy asks me out and we're together, she'll say, are you sure you didn't miss your calling? Don't you think you need to try men? I think you need to try men. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like you're gay. Are you sure that you're gay? And then all of the time, she continues to ask me about men. She's like, well, what about him? Why don't you go out with him? Or why don't you go out with this guy? Or why don't? Because I'm gay. Because I told you that I'm a lesbian. I'm gay. And she just consistently doesn't believe me. And then she told me that I need to buy a truck so that I look more masculine, or I need to start wearing way baggier clothes to volleyball so that I look more masculine. And I'm like, oh my God, is it not enough that I'm just straight up telling you that I'm a lesbian? But it's not, because she's not stopping. She doesn't stop. And that's really frustrating to be talking to someone who is within the same community, and I feel should be understanding. We should support each other, and not be the people accusing each other of inauthenticity because we don't meet a stereotype that's been given from people who are aiming to marginalize and oppress this community. To have someone else within that community accuse you of inauthenticity and then try and push you out is so frustrating. And I mean, it's not just her who doesn't believe me. There was a guy there, and he asked her for my number. We were at a tournament together, and he asked her if I was single because he wanted to ask me out, and she told him that I was gay, which, you know, I don't know how I feel about her, like, outing me like that to a man that I don't really know, but she told him that I was gay, and he said, well, maybe she's one of the ones that changes her mind, so maybe I'll still go for it. Bruh. It's so annoying, and it's the most, like, this is the most I've dealt with this since I've come out, because a lot of the time I don't dress in a way that, like, looks, I would say, like, stereotypically very straight. This is the most I've dealt with it, especially, like, from other people within the LGBTQ community. Like, I've never had someone within the LGBTQ community say something like this to me, and I know it has to do with, like, the way that I'm dressed, which is really frustrating. And I've wanted to dress more feminine recently. I don't know, I just felt like it. But then I have stuff like this happen, and I'm like, well, do I care more about, like, being authentic to myself when it comes to expression, like gender expression or self-expression, or do I care more about being clockable? And do I care more about being desired or being desirable, or do I care more about being authentic? Like, do I care more about performing authenticity, or do I care more about, like, embodying truth? And I think that's a question that when you're dealing with invisibility as a queer person, you have to ask yourself, like, which are you going to choose? And, like, is what you lose worth the gain? Like, for example, in these spaces, if I come out, if I tell people I'm a lesbian in these really straight spaces, or if I start dressing in a way that's, like, very stereotypically clockable as a lesbian, I'm going to lose desirability, and that desirability equals social capital. And I already know the side effects, particularly of men finding out that I'm a lesbian. A lot of the times, like, if I look straight, they just don't believe me. But other times, they feel offended that they don't have access, and then they get really cold and really fucked up. So it's really a question of, like, is it worth it to sort of lessen my what would be the word? Like, my experience in that space, like, being able to just, like, have a normal experience in that space, so that people know the truth that I am a lesbian? Or would I rather just gain the social capital to, like, keep a relatively normal experience? But that's at the cost of my authenticity and my honesty. And I think that's what dealing with femme invisibility really does, is, like, makes you, if you're in a safe space, makes you have to decide between sort of, like, social capital, social desirability, and social ease versus honesty and authenticity. And the issue is not being honest and not being authentic, especially in spaces where you can, like, you can choose to. Like, in these spaces, I could, like, I'm not fearing for my safety, but yet I had chosen not to. I don't think that will lead to a life where I feel ever, like, very fulfilled. And I think that's the problem, is it puts you in a position where it's like you're kind of in a bind where either you can make the decision to, like, live a completely authentic life, or do your best to be as, like, authentic as possible, or suffer the consequences of suppressing your authenticity in the favor of social ease. And both have a lot of value, because having social capital, being straight, being heteronormative, has a lot of social value and social ease and social capital that makes moving through the world a lot easier. And being authentic does not, especially if, like, part of your authenticity is about to put you in, like, an out group. And so that's what I've been dealing with recently, more than I have since I've come out. And obviously this is something that's been studied a lot when it comes to invisibility, femme invisibility, the impacts of presenting more masculine versus more feminine. When in the queer community, there's a lot of, like, research that speaks to this, that's particularly about butches and femmes. And both butch and femme are identities within the lesbian community. Those are, like, particular identities within the lesbian community. And I am a lesbian, but I don't know if I would ever identify myself as, even when I am more feminine, I don't think I would ever identify myself as a femme. But a lot of the research about femmephobia in particular centers around butch and femme experiences. And, you know, it speaks a lot. A lot of this research talks about how if you are essentially, let's just say, like, a queer woman, a lesbian like myself, you are met, like, with this choice of how you express yourself being tied to something very specific, and that is your access to the community that you want to be a part of, that you are truly a part of, versus access to a community that might protect you because it's part of the majority, and it will also like give you social capital and social value. So you're put in a position to have to like make these choices at a whim or on a whim. And one of the quotes that like I think really speaks to this is from a study called Explorations of Lesbian-Queer Genders, Butch, Femme, Androgynous, or Other. And it says, Butch and Femme women indicated that their gender expression was more important at a trend level than androgynous or other women, perhaps because their gender expressions function as important markers for romantic and sexual attractions, desires, and behaviors within Butch Femme communities. So it's kind of like, if I want to attract the people that I want to attract, or even just attract the attention of the community that I want to be in, the way that I express myself matters. And it's no longer, it doesn't always feel like it's so much about authenticity and like self-expression, even though I think being queer is so much about embracing authenticity and being outside of the norm in order to like just be yourself. But at the same time, it puts you in this position where like, if you want access to this community, you want them to find you and you want them to believe you, because they won't always, which is really frustrating. Like the girl I'm talking about, who's a part of the LGBTQ community, even though she's straight, she's still a part of it. You won't have access to it. Or you can access it and still be considered the out group. And that's so frustrating. And so fashion and self-expression starts to become something that's less about genuine self-expression and fashion, despite being like more authentic than potentially you ever have, like coming out and embracing your sexuality or whatever it is that puts you within the LGBTQ category, and suddenly becomes, again, another thing about fitting in and sort of fitting into the majority. And the majority is like based on a stereotype. So like for me, when that girl is telling me, you don't look like a lesbian, you need to buy a truck and we're really like baggy clothes, she's essentially telling me that if I'm not like a hey mama's past lesbian, that I'm not a lesbian. And the reality is like, I know that if I want to be clockable, that would be such an easy way to do it. And so what do I care about more, like being authentic, or do I care about being clockable? There's another quote from that same article, and it says, identities based upon gender expression, example, Butch or Femme, can allow a queer community to recognize and value women's preferred styles of interaction and expression. These gender expressions, however, may influence experiences of rejection or discrimination as well. I think that pretty much like sums it up. How we express ourselves is going to like kind of determine whether or not we're rejected or discriminated against in different ways from like either community, because if you're feminine, you're going to be potentially rejected within the LGBTQ community, which is really frustrating. Or if you're feminine, but you're not going to adhere, or you're not adhering to like the heteronormative femininity, which is also being straight, so heterosexual, and like you come out to like straight people in a straight setting, and they see your femininity and it no longer is performing like the stereotypical heteronormative femininity, then you're about to be discriminated against and rejected. And then you're also being like discriminated against and rejected by the LGBTQ community. So you feel like a fish out of water. It's like, it's so frustrating. I haven't dealt with this way really ever. And it's so, because what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? A lot of the times I'll have my nails painted like this, and I feel like that's a sign, but it seems like that's not even, I don't know if you can see, it's black and then red. It doesn't seem like that's enough. It doesn't seem like anything I do is going to be enough, because I think people just decide not to believe you, and that's it. They just decide not to believe you. And there's also a quote that kind of reminds me of that, where it's like people don't even consider that you could be gay. They just truly, it's not even an option in their mind. And you might even say that you're gay and they just don't believe you. They don't clock you that way. And then you're sort of out of sight, out of mind. You're no longer consideration as somebody who is like a queer or LGBTQ, no, a queer gay woman. And from a different study, there's a quote that I just think kind of speaks to this, the way that you're sort of out of sight, out of mind if you are feminine. And it said, the implicit expectation was that Butch and Femme women were attracted to one another, or to women on the other side of the Butch continuum. One Femme woman illustrated this assumption. I don't know if another Femme woman has ever flirted with me. I mean, maybe I would just never even notice. I think that speaks to it. Like, people don't even consider you being gay. It seems like you become invisible, and that really is the best way to put it, is like suddenly you become invisible. Like your identity and your authenticity and who you truly are, and your actions and what you say, your words, like, are invisible. It kind of feels like you're standing in front of people and you're like screaming like, hey, like, this is what I am, I'm gay, I'm telling you, and they just start looking like right through you. It's like they don't see you. They literally do not see you. It's like you're standing in a glass cage screaming at them and they can see you, but it's like they don't see you. It's so confusing. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like you feel like you're behind like a glass wall, a glass cage, and you're screaming that like, hey, I'm gay, but maybe there's a sound barrier so they just see you and so they don't hear anything. And it's like, how are you looking at me? I'm yelling at you. I'm telling you that I'm gay. You see me yelling at you, but yet you don't hear anything. It's like there's a sound barrier. It's so frustrating. And I think the thing I'm struggling with currently, like in my everyday life when it comes to like playing, for example, volleyball at these places is it even worth it at that point to try and express myself that way? To be honest, to be authentic, to just state that like I'm a lesbian. Is it worth it? And I think that leads to the question then of when is there even a reason to express your sexuality or like tell somebody that you're a lesbian? Because that's also something else that I think can become an issue. It's like, I guess I don't really have a reason to tell people that I'm gay, so I guess I won't. But I also see the way that it's affecting me to not tell people that I'm gay, particularly with like being aware of the fact that men as a lesbian still think that they have access to you, which is something that I want to talk about. But first, there's one more quote that has to do with like sort of the limitations on your authenticity that being a femme can place, being feminine can place. And this is from a different research article. It's called Femininity. It's the aesthetic of subordination, examining femmephobia, the gender binary, and experiences of oppression among sexual and gender minorities. And this quote, I just think really speaks to this. And it says, within both LGBTQ+ and feminist spaces, femininity was described as placing limitations on subjecthood and was seen as grounds for calling an individual's presence and authenticity into question. Consequently, femininity manifests as a barrier to authenticity and self-actualization across sexual and gender identities. For example, Hugo, white, bisexual, transgender man, states that feminine people are treated with somewhat less seriousness than masculine people, while Carly describes how lesbians and feminists alike are condescending when speaking about feminine people. And I think that's so true. It's just suddenly I'm not taken as seriously. But this is also something I want to talk about, is that I'm not taken as seriously in straight spaces. And I'm not as believed, so therefore not taken as seriously in LGBTQ spaces. But when I'm in spaces that are LGBTQ and I'm not being sort of rejected, which I've experienced more often than I have been what I am experiencing now, being feminine feels empowering versus being feminine in heterosexual spaces, like very heteronormative spaces, it feels shameful, which I want to talk about. But there's one more quote that I feel like highlights how this has a lot to do with just like our femininity rather than necessarily being like a femme lesbian, or even necessarily like our sexuality. It really just has to do with being feminine. This is from the same research study I just read from, and it says, femme lesbians in particular struggle with invisibility, which contributes to experiences of femmephobia with and outside of the LGBTQ communities. While it could be argued that this phenomenon is a product of heterosexism, many have argued that femme invisibility is more accurately a product of femmephobia. For example, the invisibility of femme lesbians and their presumed heterosexuality is deeply linked to their femininity, such that this assumption does not map equally onto butch or masculine lesbians. Thus, while femme lesbians are presumed heterosexual, they are presumed as such primarily because of their feminine gender expression. And the reason that I wanted to say that is because a lot, I think, of not being believed, yes, it's based in stereotypes, like, oh, you're an attractive woman, in the sense that you're conventionally attractive in the eyes of the male gaze. So therefore you must be for male consumption. It's kind of the idea that I think can happen, is if like a man finds you attractive or men perceive you as something that fits what this like male gaze aims to consume, they just make the decision for you and cannot conceive of the fact that you do not wish to be consumed by them. So that's a lot of how it's determined, like whether or not men find you attractive is like whether or not you are straight or you're gay. I think that's a lot of it. But also, it really is like the way that as feminine people, especially feminine women, we're not listened to. Like it is the gender expression that is devalued. and it's dehumanized in many ways, but it's devalued and our voice is devalued and we're not heard and we're not listened to. So I think a lot of it comes back to the fact that femininity in and of itself is an oppressed, femmephobia is a thing, not just in the LGBTQ way. Femmephobia is a thing, and because of that, we're not listened to. If we're feminine, it's like you're wearing a mask that like suddenly says, don't listen to me. So it's not even just about whether or not you're saying you're gay. It's just the fact that you're speaking and making a statement about yourself, and you're speaking as a person that is already perceived as less trustworthy, has less valuable of a voice, less meaningful of a voice. Like you have less personhood, less subjecthood. Feminine presentation really steals your subjecthood because of misogyny and femmephobia. And so the second you present in a feminine manner, it feels like your capacity to be a person, to have agency, to be listened to is stripped from you. And so that also comes with the exclamation of your sexuality. Because if my subjecthood is already being stripped from me, the value of my voice has been taken from me, it doesn't matter what I say, including about my sexuality, I'm not going to be heard and I'm not going to be listened to. And that is because of my feminine presentation and the devaluation and oppression and discrimination against femininity and feminine individuals and women. Because in our misogynistic culture, femininity and womanhood are often seen as like mutually exclusive, which is discriminatory and oppressive in and of itself. But that's why they tend to go hand in hand. But they're not synonymous and they're not mutually exclusive experiences. But I do think they are tied together because of how misogyny is constructed and rooted within our cultures. But I think something else that comes from this is the way that we're not believed, right? If you're feminine and you say what you are, so say you're saying I'm a lesbian, you're not believed, or you're just literally not heard. It's like they're just staring at you being like, okay, so can I have your number? Like as a man, right? You're not believed, you're not heard, and your lesbianism is not serious, it's not real, it's not an actual identity that you inhabit that manifests in your attractions and the way that you walk through the world. It's just like something that you say and another thing to be consumed by the person in front of you. And it's interesting because so there was a study that I read a while ago about femininity and like lesbians, and here's a part of that study that I think will speak to what I'm about to say. And it says, the most reported lesbian subtypes in the media were the hot lesbian and the feminine lesbian, which is in line with previous research revealing the relative invisibility of lesbians who break gender norms. There's different ways in which we're made to feel invisible and to be discriminated against and oppressed regarding our gender expression and our expression as lesbians, as people within the LGBTQ community. But what I find interesting is that the thing that seems to make so many of us feel so invisible is also the most reported lesbian subtype in the media. So it's almost theoretically the most seen, the most promoted, represented, while at the same time, the least believed. And I think that is because it's the most represented in a sexualized manner, because this had to do with a video I was researching for the sexualization of lesbians. So I think a lot of it has to do with feminine lesbians, when they are represented in a manner that is sexualizing through the lens of the male gaze, and so therefore contributes to the internalization of those consuming it. The idea that feminine individuals are just for their consumption, and this is just a costume they wear, that doesn't make them any less still for their consumption. Like lesbianism has like a character or a costume that they play, like a role play, but it's still catered towards men, versus the representation in media of gender non-conforming lesbians or like butch lesbians. It casts them in a very different light. I'd have to like go through and find my research for this, but this is something that I have researched. I have read. It's how butch lesbians and masked lesbians are presented in a very different way in the media, and often a very like dehumanizing way in a different way. Seeing them as kind of like a joke, as like creepy, for example. The character Cynthia, this is in my lesbian sexualization video, but the character Cynthia from Pitch Perfect, who's supposed to be, I have not really seen that movie, but more of like a butcher, like masked lesbian, and how it's turned her into just like a very stereotypical creep. And this was in my predatory lesbian video. It turns her into a completely different kind of trope that doesn't devalue necessarily the authenticity of her sexuality, but makes her sexuality into something that is predatory, versus I think the representation of femme lesbians, it doesn't devalue our sexuality in the sense that it makes it predatory yet believed. It devalues our sexuality by making it inauthentic and a sexualized costume. And that's what's the particular sort of, I think that's a particular invisibility that like femme lesbians and feminine individuals face, is that everything that we do, if it is authentic from us, so long as it still is perceived as heteronormative or something that would make us fit the heteronormative scripts, especially related to attraction and desire, then we must just be actually heteronormative, heterosexual, and whatever else that we're doing is nothing more than a little bit of a performance for the people that are still meant to consume us because we're fitting the script. So like straight men or men. And then I think that like speaks again to what I said in the beginning when that man told my friend that, oh, well, maybe she's one of those lesbians that changes her mind. Like maybe I'll still go for it. He obviously did not believe her because later in that day, he did ask me out and I did tell him that I was gay. So he obviously didn't believe her. He still asked me out. I did tell him that I was gay when I declined. But I think that really speaks to the fact that I know that if I was dressed not feminine, he would not have done that. He probably wouldn't have even considered asking me out, but he would have believed me. And instead he just decided to bypass and be like, well, maybe she doesn't really know. Maybe she's confused. And so I think the question comes up of like, when you have the opportunity to tell someone, or like you feel like you're now in a position where men or the people around you think that they have access to you, or that they might like be interested in you, do you tell them? Like say that you haven't said your sexual orientation, you haven't said that you're a lesbian, and you can tell that like say a man is interested in you, or there's a friend in general and you can tell that they think that you're straight, or they're about to like try and set you up with a man, or they're talking to you like you're straight. That's happened to me recently as well at volleyball, where people are now just talking to me in a way that they assume that I'm straight, which I never get upset about, but I do get uncomfortable by, because now I'm like in a position where either I have to interrupt you and clarify like, oh, I don't date guys, or I can just stay silent and sort of omit the truth to avoid just like saying it out of nowhere, or like a position where a man is very clearly like interested in you but not outright asking you out, so you don't have really a reason to reject him necessarily. So either you can just kind of like try and like avoid them getting to that point, or do you just outright say it and assume that that's what they're wanting from you? Because I had a message recently of someone saying how they'll be at like class, they'll be in school, and men will be interested and want to have like small talk, but she's obviously aware of like what the reason is. She can pick up on it, but she doesn't want to be rude or conceited by just outright being like, well, I'm gay, because they're not necessarily asking her out, but it doesn't mean that we can't pick up on social cues. And I know exactly how that feels. Especially at volleyball recently, where it's like, okay, I know why you're talking to me. I know why you're doing this. I know why you're asking my friend about me. Like, I know why you're doing this. And I don't know if I tell you because I'm worried that if I just outright reject you by saying that I'm like a lesbian, for example, that I'm going to be conceited or like a selfish, conceited, bad person, or if it's more unfair to myself and I guess the other person by not saying something. But at the same time, like when I read that message, all I could think was like, it's so interesting how because of the way that we're sort of forced to navigate the world as people who are like lesbians and as queer people and women and people who are feminine, we have to like make value judgments and we have to make like decisions regarding a situation. We have to do the extra emotional labor to decide how to protect the other person while also try to protect ourselves, because we never assume that the other person should have equal emotional responsibility, because in reality, this person is not asking you out, then therefore you do not have to tell them anything in any capacity. Yet at the same time, I know that there would be people who hear this and they're like, well, if you know that that's what they want, even if they haven't said anything, then like you owe them, you should tell them that. But you don't. You don't owe anyone anything. If they want to ask you out directly and be rejected, then they need to do that. But if not, It's not your responsibility to emotionally navigate the situation for them, to protect them from the thing that they are obviously trying to curate, which is your interest or a moment to ask you out. If they want to do that, then that is their emotional labor to maintain, to withstand, to withhold. It's not for you to navigate for them, you know? But there is like we feel like an added responsibility to do the emotional navigation for these people who are interested in us. And I think a lot of it comes from the guilt that comes with knowing that we are something outside of the norm. And so therefore we're almost being tricky, or we're tricking people by not outright telling them that we are not available or like accessible, because we are not the norm. Our femininity is not for heterosexual consumption. And I think there is like a certain kind of guilt, and then therefore like this feeling of added responsibility to say that, so that people don't get confused or waste their time or all of these things, when in reality, like, you're just existing. People, if they are approaching you, that is on them. If they want to get to know you and they want to ask you out and see if you're interested, then that is their emotional responsibility, their emotional labor, their emotional navigation. And it is not for you to feel guilty about if they aren't just transparently navigating the situation and putting you in a position where you have to like try and find a way to work around it because you feel bad about the fact that they're like inconspicuously trying to like ambiguously navigate the situation to ask you out, or to treat you like you are an option for them, like you are automatically straight, and feeling guilty because you can pick up on that because you have that sort of like social awareness, particularly because you probably put in a lot of positions unfairly where you had to develop that social awareness. And so I think it turns into this sort of like responsibility of owing them emotional ease at the expense of your comfort and even your safety or like your well-being, by being honest about like your sexuality when it's really none of their business, if that makes sense. Because unless someone is going to outright even ask you, there's no reason that you need to outright state lack of interest. Because that's also an emotional labor, an emotional responsibility, a form of emotional work and navigation that you shouldn't have to do. That like requires emotional energy that you should not have to do just because someone is doing it towards you in a way that is not direct. But it is that indirect assumption about our sexuality that puts us in a position where we have to then make decisions regarding our authenticity, or feel like we're abandoning our authenticity or our truth or our honesty in order to make them more comfortable by not saying anything. But then at the same time, feeling a guilt by not saying anything because they assume that you're straight or you're this or that you're that, and that's so unfair. Or maybe you feel bad because, I mean, you're the thing that's technically wrong. So like they're just doing what they think is normal and what everyone else thinks is normal. So I guess like I'm the problem because I'm the one who's abnormal. So I should be saying something because I feel bad. But it's like, why do you feel bad? They're making an assumption. They're navigating emotional labor in a way that's like indirect, hoping that you will pick up on it and be reciprocal in the emotional labor, if not like even take on more emotional labor and emotional navigation. And that's none of your responsibility. It's just not any of your responsibility to navigate somebody's emotional interest in you that is being built upon the assumption of your sexuality. And I understand that like that is the norm. And so people just operate under the assumption of the norm, but it doesn't really matter because it's not the reality. That's not what you are. And if they're still going to like approach you and try and operate under that assumption, then they need to do it directly and ask you, or it's not your problem, you know? Because then it'll be your responsibility to reject someone. If they outright like just come and ask you, you still don't owe them like the answer related to your sexuality or what your sexuality is. But until then, I don't think it's fair for us to feel the responsibility of emotionally navigating the situation for them to make rejection more comfortable for this person. And I think that's something a lot of like feminine individuals deal with, is an expectation to take on extra emotional labor to make the other person coming towards them feel more comfortable in navigating their emotional interest in us. And that includes the guilt that comes with knowing that we're like outside of the norm. We're technically the abnormal one, so we should have the extra emotional weight to explain that to people so they don't waste their time on us. But it's their decision, and that has nothing to do with us, you know? For example, my friend who not my friend, I won't call her my friend, the girl that I play with, saying that she tells me I need to tell people I'm a lesbian, and sometimes I think I will, but other times I'm like, I don't really have a reason to. Like, nobody is directly asking me out, like, other than that guy, and I did end up telling him I'm a lesbian. Nobody is directly saying, like, can I take you on a date? And so I don't have an outright reason to. And for a while, I felt really bad about it because I also don't want to waste people's time, but I'm also not wasting their time. I'm just existing. And I also don't want to be putting on a performance, because if you're performing, it's always at the expense of your own authenticity. And like, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to build a life that finds authentic relationships and feels like authentic to you if you continue to perform, especially in spaces where you technically don't have to, like your safety is at risk. And I felt really bad about it. I'm like, maybe I should, but I'm like, that would require me to just like look at someone that I'm assuming technically is interested in me, take on that emotional labor and that emotional risk, and just say, well, I'm gay, just so you know. Why would I do that? Like, why would I take on that emotional risk and that emotional labor? It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, that's not suddenly something that I even feel at all responsible for, when before, even like a month ago, I was feeling really bad about it and trying to figure out how to navigate it because my friend kept making me feel bad. She's like, well, they should know that you're gay. They don't have a chance. They're not asking me out directly. And if they're not asking me out directly, then it's not my responsibility to reject them. That's not my problem. And if they want to assume that I'm straight, then that's on them. That's their own assumption. You know what I mean? And that's just not my responsibility to navigate for them. It's not your responsibility to navigate other people's assumptions of you. And I think as like a lesbian, as like a sapphic person, as a feminine person, and all the assumptions that come with any kind of identity and gender expression, but assuming it's femininity, a gender expression of femininity, of a lesbian, a femme lesbian, we all face expectations and projections and assumptions that will come towards us. But the reality is that it is not your responsibility to navigate other people's assumptions towards you. And it's also, I don't think, conceited to recognize that those assumptions are being made, but I do think it's self-protective to give yourself permission to ignore those assumptions if your safety is not at risk, and avoid taking on emotional labor that is not yours to take on, you know? Because if not, I think we end up walking through the world all of the time, emotionally exhausting ourselves at the expense of protecting other people's emotions because they are making assumptions about us and our sexuality and our desires. And that's just frustrating, and it's also exhausting, and it also feels very guilty. Like, I felt like always really bad, or I felt really guilty, and now I'm like, that's on you. Like, if you want to make that assumption about me and yet still remain indirect, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that, I just can't take on that responsibility for you. And I'm not going to feel guilty for existing and not constantly existing and having to exclaim to everyone around me that I'm a lesbian. Because that in and of itself is like a really unfair demand that people who do have an identity that is outside of the heteronormative culture, or like heterosexual norm, are demanded and expected to exclaim that to everyone around them as a fucking what? Forewarning? No, like, it's not my responsibility. That is not anyone's responsibility. And that's safety, not even considering, not even talking about our safety, because that's already a huge thing. Like, why would we put our safety at risk for other people's like comfort? No. If you want to waste your time because of assumptions that you're making and you want to remain indirect in your assumptions, then that is your time to waste. But it is so unfair for the person on the other end of it who is just existing to have to take on that emotional responsibility and labor and be forced to be more emotionally intuitive, more emotionally observant in order to navigate the situation for them, to protect them. From what? Like, again, it's always at the expense of ourselves and our authenticity. And I just think that's really unfair and not something that anyone in any identity, or anyone with any identity that is outside of the norm that affects like the kind of attractions or relationships or the desires that you would have, it's not your responsibility to bear all that you are in order to make everyone else more comfortable, or in order to protect people from wasting their time. you know? And I also think that it's unfair to think that we, as like people who are feminine, because people want to take advantage of that and constantly read kindness as interest, I think it's unfair to then tell yourself that you're not allowed to continue to be who you are if you are, say, like a very, I don't know, socially outgoing or like bubbly person, because it gives people the wrong impression. But those are their emotional assumptions that they're making. That's for them to emotionally navigate, you know? I think that it's only fair to yourself to remain as authentic as you can to yourself, including if you're really socially outgoing, really extroverted. If somebody wants to misread that as flirting, I think the last thing that you should feel is guilt for their own emotional assumptions, so long as they continue to remain indirect. Like, if someone cannot directly confront you or act on their emotional assumptions, that is not your emotional labor to take on, and that is not your guilt to carry for simply existing as you are and being somebody who potentially like likes to really talk with others a lot, likes to engage with others, likes to talk, is really socially outgoing, and that's misread as flirting if someone who's feminine does it. I think that you should give yourself the grace to exist as you are, and don't weigh yourself down with the expectation to emotionally always navigate the experiences of others, I think. And I think a lot of what we experience, especially as women, people who are feminine in general, is the expectation to put in more emotional work and emotional labor. There was something I was reading recently, and it was talking about it was that book. It was a thesis by Melina Popova. It was about consent and fan fiction, but it talks about how there's like 3 kinds of emotional work, and I think it was like physical, different kinds of emotional labor. There was like cognizant, physical, and expressive, and like how some is like trying to like mentally, emotionally navigate the situation for everyone. Physically, the way that like we move in our bodies to try and navigate the situation, and then expressive, like the facial expressions we make, things like that to like try and navigate the situation for everyone else, trying to control the situation by putting in this extra emotional labor in all these different ways. And that's so exhausting and just so unfair, especially for people who aren't even putting in a fraction of the same emotional labor. And I think that comes with just being raised in a culture that teaches us to be the ones to always carry the responsibility of navigating our emotions and our impact on other people who are making assumptions about us, and then their emotions because of their assumptions. And that's just so incredibly unfair, and it will always come at the expense of your authenticity and also your everyday quality of life if you always have to take on that extra emotional labor for every single person who misreads your kindness. And I just think it's so unfair to constantly expect yourself to like carry that emotional labor. It's not yours to carry. It's not your fault people are making assumptions. I also think it's not your responsibility to navigate or waste the emotional energy on trying to convince people of your authenticity who are hell-bent on claiming that you're inauthentic. Because that's like, again, wasting your energy on people who are wasting theirs on trying to be the keepers of other people's truth and their authenticity. And there's just no point. You deserve a more free and fulfilling life than one that is caged in by the assumptions and expectations of others. And if people are stuck in that kind of mindset where they are living solely based on assumptions and refusing to expand their perceptions of people and even just believing people, they live already in a very caged life, in a very caged mindset themselves, whoever they are, if that's how they're projecting, or that's what they're projecting onto other people. And you deserve a life that is more free than that, especially a queer life, especially a life within the LGBTQ community. What it means to be queer is to exist outside of the norm and to not be caged in by these expectations. And so if someone is caging you that way, just remember like what a self-limiting life that is, and that you are deserving of a life that is not limited by things that are just constructs or limited by the expectations that come with these constructs. You know, I don't know. I think that's it. I think that's kind of like, I don't know. I think what I was just thinking about and the messages that I read, like just not being believed, being expected to navigate other people's emotions, and being feminine and the accusations that come with it, especially as like a lesbian, and how frustrating it is because it's been happening to me a lot. And I felt really bad about it, and I felt a lot of guilt being like, well, I guess I need to tell every single person that I meet that I'm a lesbian, even though there's really no reason to, but I need to protect them by telling them. No, I don't. No, because we're not performers. We are not performers. And if you were just living as you are, it is not inauthentic to not have to express every single aspect of yourself to people who don't deserve to know everything about you. For example, not saying that you are or not a lesbian. You can just exist as you are, and if other people want to perceive that as the stereotypical heterosexual heteronormative performance, then let them, and let yourself just live. But it just is unfair to let people sort of cage you into like forever emotionally navigating the world around you, or forever emotionally navigating the experiences of those around you who want to be in your orbit and who want to look at you and expect performance. Because that's so much of what this is people projecting and expecting heteronormative performance and heteronormative femininity and the expectations that come with like heterosexual heteronormative expectations of femininity. But femininity does not have to be heteronormative, and I think that it can be really empowering, but I think in heterosexual spaces it tends to be the thing that is demeaned and not believed. There's actually a quote from one of the readings, and I think it speaks to this. And it says, although lesbian gender was understood as having an innate or essential energy, women described a process of socialization in which they internalized the meanings attached to gender expressions in lesbian subculture and learned to both read and express sexual messages. And then there's another part that a lesbian had said, a femme lesbian, and I think this really speaks to the difference between being a femme in lesbian settings versus straight settings. And they said, in a lesbian context, it doesn't have the same kind of objectifying feeling that doing some of the same things does in heterosexual contexts. Like dressing up in sexy, skimpy, black tank top things. Like when I was straight, I would never wear that out to a bar because of the feeling of being kind of objectified, seen as slutty. But in a lesbian context, I would feel more of a whole person. The lesbians see me as, of course, she's a smart, dynamic woman, and of course she can be a professional and a interesting sex kitten. Okay, fair. I like that. But the point is that femininity can be an incredibly empowering thing, and to be feminine, particularly in lesbian spaces, is incredibly empowering. And yes, you can be put in positions where people just choose not to believe you, but it can be incredibly empowering, and it can feel respectable and not something that's going to be used against you. It's just unfortunately when it continues to be like perceived in heterosexual spaces, it's like constantly being put back in that box of what femininity is treated like and the expectations that come with it in a heteronormative culture. And so I think it can become easy to want to hide and no longer be feminine as a way to prevent yourself from being boxed in that way. But then I think if you do find the most authenticity and feelings of self and self-actualization in feminine expression, you shouldn't have that stolen from you. Just because in heteronormative and heterosexual settings, they're trying to demean it or belittle it, and they're trying to steal the subjecthood of it. But I think the importance is that it is your subjecthood, and it is your sexual expression. It's your self-expression, and if it brings you the greatest sense of authority and self-worth and like self-authenticity, then it is yours. And it is always yours, and whether or not people want to perceive it as something they get to define or not, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't change the fact that it is you and it belongs to you. And as much as somebody wants to turn you into an object and objectify what you present as and make it some objective truth, which is like feminine, straight, it doesn't change the actual genuine fact and reality that you are still a person experiencing a subjective experience, and your subjective experience of femininity is your own, and it can be whatever you want it to be, and attached to whatever identity it is attached to. And I don't think we should let that go or let that be stolen from us just to make the people around us more comfortable in navigating their own assumptions. Like men making assumptions about feminine individuals being straight. Be feminine, be yourself, be happy, and let them navigate that around you. And it's not your responsibility to navigate it beforehand or during their assumptions. Even if you're aware that their assumptions are being made, it's not your responsibility to navigate it. Just be yourself and don't let that be stolen from you, especially diminished and like exhausted through the emotional labor of navigating other people's perceptions of it because of their heterosexual assumptions. But I think what matters more than anything, because I think then it comes back to like, do you let it be taken from you this sense of expression in order to be clockable, or to like have people stop perceiving you one way to protect yourself, and also to like let them know in advance, apparently, to protect them from wasting their time. It's different if like your safety is at risk. That's a very different conversation. But if it's just your like everyday quality of life, lived experience, your clockability should not come at the expense of your authenticity. Because the thing that you deserve more than anything in this world is to live a life that is a full, whole life, and that feels full and whole to you. And I think the only way that we can achieve that, especially if we are lucky enough to be in positions we are able to express in these ways without feeling necessarily unsafe, is by embracing your most authentic forms of expression possible in every space and in every opportunity that you can. Because the only way that like authentic relationships and authentic spaces can find you and you can find them is by living that way. Because how are you going to find people who see you and respect you authentically if they cannot see you? And how are you supposed to find spaces, or they're supposed to find you, that would respect you authentically and be fitting for you in a very authentic way if you're not even being authentic? I think you have to ask yourself like what you'll lose versus what you'll gain if you forego being authentic to just protect others or protect yourself. And I think what you lose is like an authentic life. And I think that's so unfair, because it is authentic relationships and an authentic life, whatever way that we can have it, that I think will bring us the greatest sense of peace. And you deserve to feel at peace. And if presenting in a feminine way makes you feel the most yourself and the most authentic, I think it's so important that you allow yourself to continue to explore that, no matter the invisibility that is coming towards you currently or the assumptions that are being made about you. Because even if you make your way into spaces then still that are technically the spaces you want to be in, they're still going to feel isolating and lonely and sort of discriminatory if you enter those spaces as something other than yourself, you know? So when you find the spaces that you want to be in that make you feel like yourself and you can be in those spaces, then you need to enter them as you are. And I think that comes with living as you are already, you know? So don't hide yourself. If you don't have to, I don't think you should ever hide yourself. And I don't think people's assumptions should steal your visibility. Even though it makes us feel invisible and sometimes makes us genuinely seem invisible, I don't think you should let it steal your visibility, if that makes sense. Because if you exist as you are, that's like what it means to gay is not a look. If you exist as you are and you're a visible human being, then like you are visibly gay, you know? And if we alter the way that we present as a way to be more clockable versus authentic, then we are contributing to our own invisibility. And I think the only way to fight against the invisibility is by refusing to be invisible and refusing to allow our identities to be invisible in relation to our expression. So like if we're going to be feminine or like present in a really feminine way, then I think it's important to continue to say, yeah, but I am like a lesbian. I'm gay, I am a lesbian, and I'm visible. So make sense of that in your head. But if we continue to like not state our identities just because it makes people uncomfortable to see someone really feminine as a lesbian or doesn't believe them, or we stop dressing feminine because we want to be perceived as like clockable, the ironic reality is that then we are making the concept of like femininity and lesbianism something that is invisible, as if they cannot exist together. But they have to exist, and they have to exist out loud in order to like make a statement large enough so that people just begin to see it, and it's no longer an invisible concept. It becomes more and more visible the more that we force it to be seen, you know? I don't know. It's a weird situation to be in, because there's so much nuance in this kind of conversation, especially related to like safety, and there's just a lot to be said for it. But I don't know. I thought I would talk about it because I've been dealing with it. It's annoying. It's really annoying. And I also refuse to like let it stop me from dressing how I want to dress. And it's not going to make me buy a truck and wear really baggy clothes to go play volleyball like the girl who keeps telling me I should, just because it'll make me look more gay. I am gay. believe me or don't believe me, like, I'm not going to stop being gay, and I'm not going to stop being someone who lives a gay life. So, I don't know. It's a weird position to be in, but I think if you have the opportunity to choose authenticity, it is such a privilege that you should never turn it down. I guess that's like kind of what I'm realizing. You just deserve the fulfillment of an authentic life, and I hope whatever you express as or don't express as, that you don't let it be taken from you just because of other people's assumptions or for the comfort of others. The comfort of you, it's about the comfort of you. And I think it's easy to forget about that when we're always raised to protect others, but I hope that if you're also someone who's maybe struggling with this, like the feeling of invisibility is like, I hope that you can begin to see the worth and value in protecting yourself first, in protecting your comfort. And sometimes that means forcing ourselves to be a little bit uncomfortable. And when I say that, I mean forcing ourselves to not always do the things that we're like sort of expected to do, like navigate everyone else's social situations, but rather just like let them exist outside of us and continue to live our lives. Because that long term is protecting your peace and your comfort. And I think you deserve to protect yourself, you know? I don't know, especially being women, being feminine, being a feminine person, we're always told to protect other people, but like, you should protect yourself. Protect yourself. Protect your identity, protect yourself, protect your well-being, protect your happiness, protect your self-expression, your gender expression, and don't let it be stolen from you just because other people refuse to see it. It doesn't mean it's taken from you. They never get to take that from you because it's never something that can be taken, you know? And so I think protect yourself by refusing to live a life that assumes that if someone else doesn't see it, it doesn't exist. No, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of like where I've sort of landed as I'm dealing with it myself. So I probably will stop playing volleyball so much now because it is really pissing me off, but I don't know. That's it, I guess. Okay, yeah, that's it. I guess I'll like end it here. I also have a Patreon video that's gonna go up about this. Well, it's not about this. It's like inspired by this. It's about the normalization of violence, particularly in sex and like sexual desire towards feminine people and women. The normalization of violence as a form of sexual desire, and the impact of internalizing that, and then like growing up and experiencing intimacy or like just the expectations of violence, the normalization of it in your everyday life. That's what the Patreon video will be about. And I have 2 videos over there already. It's just more mature topics. They're more like explicit themes, like things related to sex that I just don't think are appropriate to have here, because I think anyone can search on here like a 12-year-old and find videos like this, and I make content like, are you gay, are you not gay? And I just don't feel comfortable with that. But I have 2 videos on there. And in this new video, I did like start a Patreon subscription if you're interested in joining it. It's $5. And I don't like the idea of like having anything be like a subscription fee, but I also have like hit the reality of knowing that, okay, if I want to be able to invest more in like the development of this as a community, then I have to be realistic about financial sustainability and investment. So that's why I did it. But I also care about accessibility more than anything at all. That's the point of this in general, is accessibility. So if you have any thoughts on that, like the accessibility or the price or anything, please feel free to tell me or to let me know. That always matters more than anything, and I mean that. But so that video will be over there if you feel like subscribing. I'd appreciate it. But the 2 videos that are already over there, they'll always be free and available, so that if you want to watch them and see if those kind of topics or things you'd actually want to watch, they'll always be free, so you can see first. And I'll be doing a video once a week over there. So yeah, if you're interested, that video is over there if you want to watch that now. There'll be a video once a week going up over there. These more like explicit themes that I just don't think are appropriate here. And yeah, I guess that's it. Okay, I think I'll end it here. And yeah, I'll end it here. And thank you for watching. If you have any thoughts of this, of your own, or any experiences related to this, the experience of being made to feel invisible, or dealing with the emotional labor that comes with people assuming invisibility, or projecting invisibility on you, or inauthenticity, I would love to hear it, because it's something I am struggling with right now that's really bothering me. So I would love to hear it. If you have any thoughts on this, if you feel comfortable sharing it in the comments, I think other people would probably also love to hear it, because I did have people reach out to me about this. So I know that other people would want to hear it, so it's not only welcomed but wanted. And if there's something you want to talk about, anything at all related to this or related to something else, but you don't want other people to see it, you can always send it to me directly. My email is down below, and I'd be honored to read it, to hear it, whatever it is you want to talk about that you're just not comfortable with others seeing. I'd be honored. And if there's something you want to write that's longer and you would like to have it published, I publish things on my site. I'll link below the ones that are published currently. They're really wonderful. I recommend. And if there's something you want to write and just like have published, a reason to talk about it, I hope that can be a reason and give it a place to live, your thoughts or your writing, whatever it is. And if writing isn't the kind of thing that you like to do, it's not your medium, I also have another YouTube channel that is for submissions, and I can upload a video submission or like an audio submission if you would still like to share something but you just prefer to talk about it. There's a video over there already, so I'll have that linked below. And yeah, I guess that's it. I'll end it here. And thank you for watching, for taking the time to watch. And I just hope that you know that you're never invisible, ever. And even if you feel invisible, you're not invisible. And yes, it's through a camera or a lens or a screen, but I see you and I believe you. I believe you. Whatever you are, whatever you're not, I believe you. And I know there's so many people who will also, without question, believe you. And I hope that this can be a space where you can exist as who you are, as authentically as possible, and know that you are believed. And I do moderate the comments so that anyone, if you do choose to share, tries to accuse you of any kind of inauthenticity, it won't happen. Because you are believed for who you are here, always. So, okay. That's it. So, yeah. Okay, I'm going to keep talking. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.